Want to know the secret to perfectly laminated croissants? It all comes down to temperature. Maybe just a good attitude will do it. Maybe it is extreme knowledge of gluten. Maybe it is magic. No, seriously. Temperature is everything when it comes to lamination. When you laminate dough, you're working against the gluten network. Gluten forms when you mix flour and water together and knead it. The more you work it, the tighter the bonds between the proteins become, which means the dough is less likely to tear when you roll it out. But in order to get those beautiful, distinct layers in puff pastry or croissants, you need to start with a strong gluten network because that will hold the shape of the pastry. As you roll it out, if your dough is too slack, it'll just tear apart. And here's a fun fact. Did you know that a group of physicists used a laser to measure the thickness of layers in a croissant and found that the perfect croissant has 520 layers? Well, we won't be making 520 layers today. Let's keep it at 8. Once you have even pieces of dough, you want to roll them out into thin sheets. And this is where the second part of the equation comes into play, butter. You want to make sure that the butter you are using is at the same temperature as your dough. Because if it is too cold, it won't properly laminate, and if it's too warm, well, let's just say you'll have butter everywhere, but in your layers, the next step is to chill the dough. And this is so important. Chilling the dough before rolling it out makes the gluten less elastic and much easier to work with. When you roll out chilled dough, it's less likely to tear, which is key to preventing the dreaded monkey fingers. Also, chilling the dough slows down the rate of fermentation. If you proof croissants between 26 and 31 degrees Celsius, they'll rise nicely without becoming too airy or overproofed. The next step is the first fold, and then you roll it back up and chill it again. This is how you get that perfect layering of thin sheets of butter sandwiched between the dough. Once you've made your final fold, you want to let the dough rest overnight. This allows the gluten to relax, which makes it easier to roll out and prevents tearing. Plus, it gives the flavors time to develop. Resting overnight also helps the dough become more elastic, which allows it to stretch and bend without breaking. And really, the science behind this is pretty simple. During the resting period, the gluten strands realign themselves, forming a more continuous and elastic network. This results in a smoother, more flexible dough that can be more easily rolled out and folded. Now, when you proof the dough, you want to make sure you don't overproof it or you'll have dense, heavy croissants. So, once the dough has doubled in size, it's ready to bake. The next step is to roll out the dough, and this is where your precision makes a difference. Each roll should be as close to the same size and thickness as possible. This ensures that the layers cook evenly and that the finished product is both aesthetically pleasing and textured. As the butter heats up, it melts and turns into steam. The steam creates small pockets of air in between the layers of dough, giving you that beautiful, flaky texture. Did you know that there are actually two types of flour used in croissants? Bread flour and pastry flour. The type of flour you use affects the final texture of the baked good. Higher protein flour produces a tougher, more elastic dough that can withstand the rigors of lamination. However, too much protein can make the end result tough and chewy rather than flaky and light. On the other hand, lower protein pastry flour produces a softer, more tender crumb, but may not hold up as well during lamination. One last thing. Understanding lamination will change the way you look at croissants forever. You can impress your friends with useless facts like, did you know that the croissant was invented in Austria? Legend has it that a Viennese baker created the croissant in the early 1800s. As a tribute to the Turkish army as crescent moon-shaped battle flag, the pastry quickly gained popularity and eventually made its way to France, where it was refined and became the iconic breakfast treat we know today in France. Puff pastry makers take the original recipe and add more butter to create the flaky, buttery layers that we all love. Over the years, many variations of the croissant have appeared, from savory-filled breakfast pastries to sweet snacks enjoyed in the afternoon. Today, croissants remain one of the most popular breakfast treats in France and around the world, depending on how many times you fold the dough. A croissant can have up to 649 layers. Now go forth and be creative in the kitchen. We dare you to try your hand at making the perfect croissant. You might just surprise yourself.